Hey everyone, Stephanie here, and I am coming to you with a Connecting to Healing interview. Today I'm interviewing Terri-Ann Russell. I'm so excited to have you here, Terri. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Stephanie, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So I would love for you to share your healing journey. That is the purpose of this Connecting to Healing interview channel. It's about sharing our journeys and giving people inspiration and the permission to heal themselves. So
Mm, I love that.
yeah, so tell us about your journey. What led you to where you are now?
My journey has been long and tumultuous, as I say, a lot of healers, and I work with a lot of healers too. I think healers in particularly set up this really difficult life path for ourselves to make sure that we get to where we're going. So my journey, I don't know about you, but when I was young, I really thought it was pretty linear. You go from A to B. What I've learned is it's like a spiral and you're all over the place. And then finally, one day you wake up and you go, all right, I'm transformed. I've, you know, transcended. And then you find out you have not. And you start unraveling all that stuff again. So my actual journey, I'd probably have to, if I had to speak from it, I'd say it probably began long ago as a child. I set up, tremendous amount of difficulties to come through in this life. My hardest journeys have been the ones with my children that brought me to where I am today. My youngest daughter was born sick. She was a medically ill child. She bled internally for over 3 years. She had over 40 blood transfusions and she had 4 intestinal surgeries. And that was over the span of about 6 years.
Poor kid.
So when she was about 7. So she set up a really difficult life path for herself that sort of intertwined with my life path to make sure that I got to where I was going. So that's how I really began to get into Reiki, was through her.
Hmm.
Fast forward, and so I began Reiki. I healed her. She's been hospital free. Fast forward into 2019, my son, who was 27 at the time, suddenly passed away from a medical illness, a complication that was misdiagnosed that happened to be similar to what my daughter's was. And so I don't believe in coincidences. I believe truly that my children and I have had this um, agreement that we created when we were in spirit. And for both of them, my daughter making sure that I got on the healing journey, and now my son passing to make sure that I would continue on going where I needed to go. So that was in 2019. And through that, it changed a whole trajectory of how I did my business. My business really pivoted from the death of my son. So I was really much into the healing, and I still am. But it very much turned into mindset and grief and timelines and contracts. And it got deeper and deeper as I went.
Wow. So tell me about the book. So what is From Death to Life, the incredible true story of Anthony Joseph about?
Okay, so this is the book.
Nice cover. It's
And this is my
beautiful.
son. And so my son was born a very old soul. Him and my daughter are the two of my 5 children that were born very old souls, very much advanced, more so than I. I found out much later on. So the incredible true story of Anthony Joseph is the story of how Anthony communicated with me after his death. So even though I'm spiritual and I have this deep connection with the divine, losing a child, I was very much in the human realm of being a mother that lost a
Mm.
child. That was very devastating. It brought me down a path of wanting to take my life. I was suicidal. I was not going to stay here. I had no intentions of staying here after he left. And for me, it was a life lesson I needed to learn. So he began about at 4 months after his passing, urging me to write this book And he went to school for communications and journalism. He always wanted to write a book. He always wanted to be a writer. He was a DJ. He was very much artistic and eccentric. I had never thought about writing a book. I had never, it wasn't anything that I thought I could ever do. So for me, he put me in a place of really being out of my comfort zone, and he would urge me at 4 months in that deep grief to get up, write this book. It needed to be written. It needed to give parents in particular, but anybody, hope that after your loved ones pass, they don't just die and disappear. There's a connection that remains even after their physical body is gone. There's a spiritual connection that you still have with them. And so the message of his book is that we are all connected. We all come from one. We are all able to access this ability to connect with our loved ones in spirit.
That's beautiful. Well, and I think you just answered the why you began writing your book. So there you go.
Well, it was very cathartic for me also. I found as I began writing, I was struggling with the suicidal thoughts. So if you know about spirit coming in, I'm clairaudient. I hear a lot of messages. I can also receive when my vibration, my frequency was very low, and grief, which is I put in the book from David Hawkins, The Map of Consciousness, which talks about grief, sadness, pain, sorrow. Those are all low frequencies. We're energy beings. Joy, love, peace, connection, those are all higher frequencies. So when you're down here in the lower frequencies, you can also get dark spirits that come in. And those dark thoughts, those dark entities are what I heard about taking my own life.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Just kill yourself. You can be with your son tomorrow. They promised me the world. You can be with him. And he would tell me, you are not going to be with me if you kill yourself. So I had two. I was fighting both of them because I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to stay any longer. I was so distraught over his loss. And that's all I could focus on at that time. And that's why I think the book was so cathartic for me. It gave me the ability to get those words, those feelings out of my body, and gave me the ability to free them up, like release them to the universe. And also by helping others now, because I am a helper through and through. I've been put on this earth to be of service. So I've worked really hard at what I do, practicing my craft. And the book was just another way for me to get things out there to help other people.
Yeah, I've personally struggled with depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. And I found my path to bliss through yoga practice. I didn't have to lose anyone, but I definitely lost a lot of my skills. I had carpal tunnel in my 20s, and that threw off my entire trajectory. So I completely understand. So then what is your professional background? Did you acquire a higher education degree prior to discovering Reiki? How did that path shift?
So I was a young mom. I actually came out of college. I always knew I wanted to be a mom. I became a mom at 21, and I had 3 boys back to back in 5 years. And then my daughter was born when my oldest son was 19 years old. So most of my life I spent being a mom, which is what I loved. But I always was drawn back to school. And so I studied. I have associates in psychology. I have a Bachelor of Science in human development. I've always been very interested in the mind and the psyche and why do we do the things we do? Why do we have the thoughts that we have? Why, how can we manipulate what that was that we grew up with, those thought forms and everything? And how do we change those things? Because I don't believe that you are who you're told you're supposed to be. And so I had all these questions. I was always very curious. So learning about psychology drew me in. And I did that while my daughter, after a tumultuous divorce and while my daughter was very sick, I threw myself into school to get my degree because at 43, I found myself on my own. after being married for so long and having a sick child. And so I knew I had to find a way to support her. And, you know, you really cannot work. I couldn't get a job. I couldn't really do anything except go to online school at that time because she needed 24-hour care.
Right.
So I threw myself into my studies. And it's funny, people say, well, you don't use your degree. And I'm like, well, I do use my degree. I just don't use it in the normal sense that you would say I use my degree. I don't work for anybody. I work for myself.
Yeah. Well, and I think psychology and human development are very much in alignment with healing. You know, we need to know about human behavior and how they work in order to really be effective as healers. So I think it informs you as a healer. That's great. So what about formal training in Reiki? Did you have like the 3-year or 3-month, however it goes?
I studied for years. I started with Reiki 1 very selfishly. And I did Reiki 1 and Reiki 2 back to back just to help my daughter. That was my only goal at that time. Interestingly, I was introduced to Reiki when my boys were young. There was an event at a Barnes and Nobles, I think, and I just always felt power in my hands. I was raised Catholic, so I know about the laying of the hands. Reiki is just a Japanese version of that. So I was always drawn to that. People would say, you have such a healing touch, you know, I just love your feel, you know? And so that was something that I always felt within me, but I didn't really understand what that was. I continued on my Reiki. So I was trained in, I look at it now, I am such a student. It's like I am a student of life. I was trained in Yasui Reiki, Karuna Reiki, and Light Theta-and Reiki, which is the highest bands of Reiki.
Wow.
I was also trained in Theta healing and quantum healing, past life regression. I do a lot of work, hypnosis. So all of this stuff that I've acquired through the years really is just a remembrance of who I was in past lives. Like, it's like I've done this training, but I really don't think I ever need to do any of this training. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I was doing energy healing before I became a Reiki practitioner myself. I just kind of intuitively, I knew that love, like universal love energy, was transmittable and I could give it to people. So
without knowing what we're doing, our soul guides us to do this. So that really is our training. Most recently, I've been initiated under Mary in writing my next book. And so she's initiated me for the past year. I've never had such extensive training as I've had under Mother Mary. You would think Mother Mary's like all love and bliss, but
kind of intense, huh?
There is that aspect, but you also got to uncover what's been holding you back too. And so through my new book, the transmissions that come through with Mother Mary they're just mind-blowing. Everybody I feel could benefit from that book because there's so much that you're going to get individualized for you when working through those transmissions. So whatever it is, like, and I share my experiences. One of the things that Mary guided me was to share my experiences. Now this for me was really out of my comfort zone. You know, the book about Anthony was very raw and emotional, and I was in that space, and that was okay to share that. But now through the Mary transmissions, I'm very raw and very vulnerable about what's going on in my life, what's been wrong, what I haven't addressed in my own life. And so those are coming to the surface for me to work on and release. And that was part of the agreement, is what I needed to share in my next book.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So when did your business officially begin? When did you start actually offering these services?
So I trained about 2016, I believe, when my daughter was sick. She actually, through those 3 years, we had been all over the country. She had been diagnosed, but nobody would touch her. She was too small. They told me she would die if they did another surgery.
Wow.
So I really began researching alternative ways how I could heal her. That was my only intention at that time. So that was about 2016. It's now 2022. She's been 6 years hospital free with no blood transfusions. Her hematologist, her oncologist, they're all like, what are you doing? And I'm like, energy healing. And they're like, it's not possible. And I'm like, well, she hasn't had a blood transfusion and none of you helped her. So, the proof
I
is
think it's working.
proof is in the pudding. So that was about 2016. 2017, I probably have to say, I went on to get my Reiki master, so I'm a Reiki master teacher. My intention then was to begin teaching Reiki because I wanted everybody to know about Reiki because it helped create a miracle in my child. And I wanted other parents to know that with a medically ill child, especially as the mother-child connection, you are able to heal your child. So I wanted people to know that. So about 2017, I started dabbling in that, and I moved up to Sedona part-time, and then we moved up full-time, and then we came back. So our path has been very laden with lots of change, I say.
Yeah. So then what was your first objective when you started? You mentioned training other mothers.
Training other mothers. My first objective was help people to understand that they can heal themselves.
Yes.
We put such, and don't get me wrong, I do believe there is a place for the traditional medicine. My daughter would not have survived without blood transfusions. She would have not have survived without surgery. So I do believe there's a place for traditional medicine. Where it gets skewed for me is when they give you a diagnosis that's terminal or that is a death sentence and tell you you have to be on this pill forever and this is it for you and you're not going to be able to change that. You can't reverse. That's where I sort of get angry. And my mama bear side comes out because I do believe that we have the power to heal ourselves with our thoughts. And through epigenetics, most recently, which I've been learning, we have the power to heal everything within us. It's just a matter of getting down to what it is and uncovering those things that have held us. Like, for example, if you have a mom and she had diabetes and her mom had diabetes and she says, oh, my mom had diabetes, so I'm going to get diabetes. And you continue that over and over and over again. And yes, you do get diabetes now because you say, that's in my family, it's genetic, I can't change that. And yes, you can change that. I'm here to tell you, you can absolutely change that. So I like to speak, I like to share my knowledge with the world. I like people to know and understand that everything we say, do, feel, react to, that's all part of what our path is while we're here, is to heal ourselves.
Definitely. I wholeheartedly agree. I'm so glad we're having this conversation. So tell the world, what services specifically do you offer today?
Oh my gosh, I offer so many services. So most recently, through the Mary transmissions that I was trained under, I've received galactic information, which before, I'll tell you, I have no remembrance of it really, but really I do, my soul does. So there's a galactic connection that I have now that I've been training. And I do angelic golden healing. I do Merkaba. And so do you know about the Merkaba? Because the Merkaba is the vehicle that carries you, right? That's our energy body. It's two different triangles upside down, one right side up, one upside down. That's our vehicle that carries us through other dimensions. And that Merkaba has been distorted in the 3D. So the information I received is that needs to be repaired and it needs to be activated now as we're moving on to higher dimensions. And so think about it as if it's like a flash drive. All right, we have our flash drive, we put it in our computer. It has so much information on it, we can't add any more. Now we need to take that information out, delete it, so that new information can be put in. Your Merkaba is the same way. Needs to be repaired and activated again with new coded information that's necessary as we align to these higher dimensions.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're doing this. It's so important. So how have you pivoted? I mean, we've had an interesting couple years with the pandemic. How has your business changed in the last couple of years?
So my business has really changed. You know, before I did a lot of what I find with when you're a healer, a lot of people like to come to you in person. They like to experience your energy field. I had a difficult time going virtual because people they really have a hard time understanding the concept that you can be there and I can be here and I can still do the same work. That you're still going to receive that healing or whatever the fact that I'm doing, whether it's an activation or whatever, you're still going to receive it. I've worked with people as far as India or Australia. So it doesn't matter where you are on the planet, I can still do the work. So my business has sort of struggled going over into the virtual realm because of the way that people think.
Hmm.
And the pandemic has really done a number on people with fear and all that. So it's kept people from really realizing who they are.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
I
it's
think
so important
it's been
now.
pretty powerful for a lot of people. The experience of isolation, having to really look at themselves in that experience. Yeah.
Scary. I think a lot of people get to a certain point, and I know from my clients, they get to a certain point and they stall because, all right, well, I don't want to look at that. It's, you know, that I've get buried that or I've worked on that. And I'm like, well, you haven't, you know, there's more. There's always deeper work we can do. There's stuff that comes out of that work that you've done now that evolves. And you're like, okay, now what is this that I need to look at? And myself included, I'm not exempt from that. I've done tremendous amount of deep diving healing that I've not wanted to do. And I get in that space too. I'm like, look, I've done this. I don't want to go there again. And they're like, well, you're going down again. You know, this is what you need to do. So I'm not exempt. Don't think that I sit here and I say that I'm exempt, because I'm not. I truly believe that we are here to learn and we're always learning. And
Yeah.
part of that human experience is to learn all of those things that have kept us where we were.
Definitely. I think that it's true that healers go through a tremendous amount of darkness to get to their light. Just because we have to be like, we have to build armor and we need the pain in order to build the armor.
Well, really, how could you talk about experience if you haven't been there? It's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like one of those things. I find that the clients that come to me have experienced similar because our vibrations are similar, our energy is similar. And so they can relate to what I'm saying because I share with them that I've been there. We've come from a place where we don't want to share that. Like, and originally, you know, if you think about it, go back to when coaching began or healing began, and people were like, oh, you just do this, this, and this, and it'll work for you. Well, no, that's not the case anymore, because you really need to look at what it is that you haven't looked at. And I'm going to tell you from my aspect that I've already looked at that and done that, right? I find probably about people you work with. Like, I work with mentors still too. They're usually about like a year and a half ahead of you on their journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're really able to share your experiences with them. And that's the connection that has been missing for so long. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Yes. So we have had some struggles as business owners through this time. What is your biggest or greatest motivator?
Wow. You know, my biggest motivator, I'd have to say, is going back to earlier, I'm a helper. I was brought here to help. From being a child, I remember I'm tiny, like I was much tiny. I was like 5'2", 110, 120 pounds, so always very tiny. But I fought for the underdog, and I would take on anybody because I didn't believe in inequality or unfairness. I would fight that people were bullying other people. I would be the one and so I'm tiny, so my mouth really had to carry me to make sure I didn't get obliterated. But that's really been my biggest motivator, is helping people, you know. And now speaking, I speak to a lot of people. I do in-person events and virtual events where I'm speaking about all of the information that I've accumulated and the experience, because that knowledge and that experience that you've had That's your purpose,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes, definitely.
Talking to people, whether you've been sexually abused or physically abused or whatever it is, or you've lost a child, that is your purpose. You know, if you've had fibromyalgia, whatever it is,
Hmm.
your purpose in this life is those experiences that you've had. And how are you going to help other people through it? My guides and angels always say, all right, well, this is what you're going to do next. And I'm like, what? Like, are you crazy? Like,
No, they're being real with you.
they always are. And it takes me some time to
Yeah.
adjust to it again. Don't think I'm sitting here like, oh, yeah, they said do this. All right, let's go. Because I'm not. I'm like, what? Are you kidding
Yeah,
me?
yeah. So what is the experience being coached by you like?
I'm tough. So I am Italian, New York bred, born and bred. I'm a tough coach because also I've done the work. You know, I tell my clients, I'm down in the trenches with you. Don't think anything that I'm telling you to do, I have not done. So being coached by me is really, you've got to be able, number one, to be able to withstand doing the work. I think that's where people sort of get that misconception about healers. Oh, healer, heal me. You know, I'm not that coach. I'm not that healer. I'm not here to heal you. You're going to do the work for yourself. But, you know, opening their abilities to their own intuitiveness. I also believe in empowerment, empowering of women. I'm very strong. Like I said, I have a daughter and a stepdaughter now after having sons, and I truly believe in women's empowerment. We have the ability. So what I teach women is how to open those intuitive abilities, but also has to trust what those abilities are. We all have them. I'm not any different than anybody else. You're not any different than anybody else. We all have them, and we just have to be able to, number one, know how to access them, and number two, know how to trust them.
That's so important.
Because it sounds crazy sometimes, right? When you get this information in and you're like, okay, well, like my husband, like now we need to move to Sedona. And he's like, right, we just built a big, beautiful house. Are you crazy? Like, we barely been in it. Are you nuts? We got to go. I'm being called to go. You know, things like that. You have to trust that what you're being shown or given is what you're supposed to do. I always say, like my son, my angels, they've not brought me this far now just to leave me out in the cold and be like, all right, you're on your own.
Okay, well, I would love to hear a little more about your work. And so we're going to get a little deeper. um, can you talk about soul contracts and why we have them?
Soul contracts are so intricate. Okay, we make soul contracts. For those of you that don't know, we make soul contracts when we are in spirit with our loved ones, with our angels and our guides. We sit down at a big table, just as if you were here on earth making this contract. Some contracts are very strict, like, you know, who your husband's going to be, the children you're going to have, what you're going to do. Your parents, you know, those contracts are when you're going to leave, when you're going to come, you know, so those contracts are pretty much written in stone. Um, Other contracts have more leeway. Like it's like, because we have free will on this planet. So say like, you know, like for example, like I lived in New York, and my current husband now lived in Arizona, but he lived in North Carolina before. Say he hadn't come to Arizona, or say I hadn't come to Arizona, would we still meet? And the answer is yes, because we would have met somewhere else. Those strict contracts, that's going to happen, and your free will sometimes can get in the way and prolong that, but that will happen. Other contracts can be renegotiated by the work that you've done. So if you've done extensive work on yourself, like I have over the last few years, and thrown yourself into finding out exactly what it is that I came here to do, the blueprint to my soul and my Merkaba, what that means, and how I'm able to change those contracts. So maybe before, what my plan was to help children, right? I was very much into that when my daughter passed. And then my son passed, and all right, now I'm going to work on grief with parents. So my contracts have always been very family oriented, very people oriented. Most recently, because of the changes that I made, I was able to renegotiate those contracts. and change a lot of that trajectory originally that my soul had written. So if I, it's kind of hard to put into words. So it's like I've progressed where I was past where I was supposed to be. So now
Right. So that changes the path.
yeah. So now this next 20 years, it's the most awesome thing ever. I can do whatever I want to do now because I've done the work. And I'm not saying that being bragging or anything or being conceited, but I've done the work. So instead of still having to go through that path of like healing my grief from the loss of my son or working on those things with my ex-husband and all of that, I've done that work. So now these next 20 years, I've changed the trajectory of all of that I was supposed to do because now it's open and expansive because I progressed past there.
That's beautiful and
And
so
I'm
exciting.
I can do that.
So, is there a correlation between past lives and our current life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you think about how many lives your soul has lived, it's mind blowing. Like, so I can probably count maybe 6 lives that I know about out of the thousands of lives that my soul has been in, on planet and off planet.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not just from Earth, just so you know.
I agree. Yes.
So think about that, right? Recently, I've had clients and they've recently come to me, and this is funny because I've found out recently that I am a star. I came from a specific star. I
Mm-hmm.
started having clients come to me that have been from specific stars in that star group. And so that's not scripted or anything. They're in hypnosis. We're doing past life regression. That's coming through for them. And so it's mind blowing to think now that since I've gotten that information about myself now, my clients, so my angels and guides bring them to me and that we start putting these pieces together, right? And so, oh, then we find out, well, we know each other, right? We've had this otherworldly connection. And what is that? And when we start working together and we start doing more stuff. And so it's my belief that we are truly all come from one consciousness. And that consciousness of one spreads out all these sparks. So we are truly connected. And I trust everything my son said. He said, we are all connected. So, you know, the connections, the deep connections you make with people on your path, they are past life connections. They are soul connections. So whatever you're meant to do, say in this life, whatever your purpose is, there's past life stuff that has to do with that. If you know people, I do a lot of stuff with clients with past life regression of fear, or they've been very controlling, say, and they want to work on that. So I've recently most had a client who was very controlling and she wanted to find out why. And we went in to do a hypnosis, and what came through was she was a general in an army where she had to be very diligent and very controlling of her army. So she's carried that without her soul knowing she doesn't need that anymore. That's part of her soul, right? But how does she change that now? So it's interesting. Now she understands what that is, and now she can work on that. It's not her per se, it's her soul, right?
Yeah. So how can we change those contracts and timelines?
Mm.
What does the work look like?
The work is deep, and it's not for, I always say it's this kind of work is not for the faint of heart because, you know, I'm going to keep it real with you. It's not just the work in this life. It's the work our past lives. It's our ancestral, our generational, our mothers, our grandmothers. They carried it. So we've had all these lives, right? And if you think back to those lives, there was a lot of poverty, right? There was a lot of hatred. There was a lot of pain. A lot of those things are playing out today in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because where we're going, we can't have that anymore.
Right.
So it's coming to the surface and people are going, hey, I don't, why is there poverty in our country? Why are kids starving in our country? That
Yeah.
should never be allowed to happen. And so people are starting to recognize, I mean, you can see, think about like my grandparents were in the Depression. It's we're getting close to a depression right now. It's like, why is this occurring now 100 years later, 50 years later, whatever it is? So definitely doing that work that we're all doing. And so there is no free pass. You're not going to get a free pass because I'm over here doing my work just because we're connected. You've got to delve in and do your work. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we're at this pivotal crossroads, all of us now. Everybody on the planet is at this pivotal crossroads. You can either go this way where you've been or this way where you want to be better. And so, what does that look like for each individualized person? It looks like them doing their own work. What has held you back? What is the fear, the resentment, the pain, the sorrow, the lack, the self-worth? We all have these things, and people are so afraid to talk about them, right? And so afraid to, like, oh, you're going to think less of me if I tell you what happened to me, right? And so that stigma's gone. It's not there anymore. I can tell you, in my world, and this is my truth, right? We can go deeper. This is my truth, my world, my lens that I look through it. It doesn't exist. So we can't have that where we're going anymore at this choice point that we have. So these next 2 months, I really feel for a lot of people, they're going to go one way or the other. And it's sort of like a push and pull, what I find with myself, even like falling back into those old habits.
Mm-hmm.
That's very easy to do, but it's not going to get you anywhere. And so, how do I release finally all of that? I've got to make a conscious decision and conscious effort now to say, okay, whatever that is, right? I've got to step into the new. What does the new look like? And so, it's just like an act of practice, like you would do anything else, right? You practice riding a bike. You just don't get on a bike and ride a bike.
Right.
So you have to practice it, and you're going to fall off that bike. It's the same thing. I love when they give me analogies like that.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about DNA activation and the crystalline light energy.
So, everybody has their own thoughts on DNA activation and crystalline energy. We are carbon-based beings.
Mm-hmm.
Where we are going, we need to be crystalline-based beings. Our DNA needs to be changed. It needs to be activated and repaired, as I said, like with the Merkaba.
Mm-hmm.
Our genes have been tampered with, and so they need to be reactivated, upgraded, crystalline energy. We do that through healing. We do that through activation. We also do that through our mindset, right? Believing that we're not just this physical being that we are. We have all these energy bodies, right? We have the physical body and we have all these energy bodies. So the crystalline energy is becoming more crystalline. And what does that mean to most people? Well, that crystalline energy is energy that's more, when I see it, it's like very crisp and very clear,
Mm-hmm.
like a crystal. So it's not cloudy or mucky with all of that older energy, that fear, pain, resentment, sorrow, grief, anger. So whatever it is that you hold in your field, it creates this murky, like cloudiness.
Okay.
When you do crystalline energy work or DNA activation, it helps activate your psychic gifts. It helps you activate your soul blueprint. It helps you look at what your purpose is. What kind of work do you need to do? Do you need to change the work that you're doing? Do you need to get some formal training, maybe, that you change your work now? We're going to very much service-based performance. We're not so much about working that 9 to 5 anymore and doing all those old things that we did for so long. So you're a lot younger than me, but when I was coming up, I was told you go work for corporate, right? You make so much money a year, you get your benefits, your 9 to 5, your job, you get a week off, and you're happy with that, right? Because that's where
Right, and you get your 401k for your retirement.
yes, and you buy your house and you have your family, and that's your life, and that's all your life is.
I never believed any of that.
Me either. And people thought I was, my family thought I was crazy. I'm the only one in my family. So when I went back to school at, how old was I? 43. All they wanted from me was to get that degree and get that 9 to 5 job. And I still couldn't do it. And so I've, I've done it my way. So yes, I have a degree and I use it differently, but I've never resonated with that. And so a lot of people are no longer resonating with that because that doesn't exist for us. I truly believe as we do this work and we change and we're crystalline based, we're more caring, we're more loving, we're more compassionate. We want to be more service based to other people. Um, and it changes the trajectory of our life and
Yeah.
who we are, how we help others. I really see in the future like communities of families in tiny houses on pieces of land, growing their own food, growing their own medicine, you know, being a village with tons of kids running around. And so that's how I truly see where we're going.
I agree. I had a vision just like that when I was in my 20s. And I thought, I'm going to have to do a whole lot of work to get to that place. I knew that it would be a challenge to get there. So yeah, I'd love to share that with you at some point, since we live fairly close to each other. This thing that I drew out, it was like a mind map of what I saw in the future. So I call myself a visionary because I see so much of that.
Right.
That it's like that's all I'm working on is future. I see that. I see that we can bring so much healing to the planet and increase the vibration and do all this work.
It's not
So
some crazy
important.
talk anymore, is it?
It's not. People are resonating with it.
You know why? Because they're tired of what it used to be. They don't want to do that anymore. I mean, that's not you. My son, my oldest son, has $100,000 in college debt. That at that time, I was also indoctrinated to believe that you go to college out of high school and you get that degree. $100,000. He can't buy a house for $100,000, but you'll give him college loans for $100,000. You know, that's ludicrous in this day and age that, you know, that those beliefs are still there. And why isn't that provided for? Like, I'm so not 3D. Like, I am the only one in my family that is not on the 401k train. Buy your house, put all your money in the bank. I'm like, they think I'm a loon because I'm like, nope, nope, nope.
Well, let them think that, because you're doing amazing work, Terri-Ann. This is so awesome. So I feel like, how do you know if you're doing a good job is kind of obvious. You see when people shift, right? You can tell.
I see and I feel, and they call me and they're like, oh my God, I've been down in the hole. Like, you were right. Like, a lot of my clients will have lack, or they feel lack. They don't feel like they can trust what they're being given because we haven't been taught to trust what we're being given, because it sounds crazy, right? It does sound like, go, my son told me, sell everything you own, sell your business, go across the country in an RV and travel and heal yourself for a year. And when I told my husband, he was like, all right, let's do it. And I thought he was never going to do it. So, when you talk about things like that, it sounds crazy, but that guidance you're receiving, why wouldn't you trust the divine within you? Why would you question the divine within you when they're giving you that information? Yeah, it sounds crazy, but it always ends up being either what you needed, right? Or what it was to get you on another piece of your path, to guide you to what you needed to do. In my case, it was healing. It was very healing for me. There were two parts of it. It was healing, and I was activating the Earth's grids as I was going around the country. I was receiving zip codes, and through those zip codes, I would go to those places, and I would do my work at those places, and I would activate the energy grids, the ley lines of the Earth.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I love this. I'm so excited to share this. So do you get testimonials? You ask clients for reviews, or like with
I do,
the business stuff?
Because I don't think people, like, they're not trained to like give good reviews in this country. Everything is like a negative review for everything. Like, if you go get bad service, you're like, oh, I'm going to write a review. But if you go get great service, you're not thinking. So wherever I go, I write everybody a glowing review. I was just on vacation in Oregon with my son, and the hotel was great, the food was great, because I'm like, you know what, people really need that in their business. Especially, I don't know much about social media. I'm not business oriented at all. So I don't know about algorithms, and I don't follow any of that. I go with what I feel, and I trust that the universe will bring to me who they need to bring. So I do ask people to write a review for me to get it out there to show, or I'll ask people to share my YouTube channel or like my YouTube channel and subscribe to it, because I think it's so important. I've gotten glowing reviews from people that have never thought they would experience the level of healing that they felt, or that have never had a Reiki experience. And we call it Reiki, but I do so much more like the angelic golden healing that I do.
Right.
But people resonate with Reiki. But they've never had an experience like that. And then they come and they have an experience. I tell everybody, just try it at least once. I mean, what do you have to lose to try an energy healing experience? It's like anything else you try.
Mhm.
And experience it for yourself. And I've not met one person that has not experienced a beautiful feeling from having Reiki.
I agree. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Every one of my clients
Yeah,
just
see?
they leave feeling so much lighter,
Lighter,
less
expanded,
stressed. And yes, it's
open. They
wonderful.
describe it sometimes as if they have these like their organs are all squished together when they come and they're stressed, and when they leave they just feel like all of their rib cage is open and they can like breathe easier. And then they'll call me like a few weeks later and be like, oh my god, do you know I had that Merkaba activation with you and my life has changed drastically. Like, it was like really hard in the beginning, like I had to make tough decisions. Am I going to leave my husband? Am I going to leave my job? But as I did that and I made those changes, my life transformed. And so, I always, it just makes me feel so good. And what I feel about being a healer is what I give, I get. So when I'm doing a healing on you, I am receiving all of that love, all of that light that I'm working through me. And again, it's not me, it's coming through me from the divine. So the divine is giving it to you, but the divine is also giving it to me as the vehicle that it's working through.
Yep. I'm still feeling it. I did a Reiki session on Friday. Yes.
Love it. It's so
Yes.
beautiful, isn't it? I bet you your client was like, wow.
Yeah, yeah. She's one of my regulars. It's so good. It's so, so good.
It's just for the relaxation, I'd say, alone. Like, even when I learned Reiki when my daughter was really sick and to heal her, I found that for me, I was so stressed that it really just relaxed me.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why I tell everybody they should at least do Reiki 1. If nothing else, you do 21 days of self-healing. I think everybody could benefit from being a Reiki 1 level because you do that 21 days.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we've come to the end of the interview, but I'd love for you to share how people can reach you to schedule sessions.
So I am all over. I have YouTube channels under Terri-Ann Russell. Keeping It Real with the Sisters of the Light is my newest podcast with my friend who was guided to me. Terri-Ann-Russell.as.me is my scheduler, and that's my website. So you can look at all of my services. I offer a ton of services. And sometimes it gets to be a little much for people and they're like, oh my God, what should I do? Because there's so much. But Terri-Ann Russell, that has that me. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm everywhere. If you search Terri-Ann Russell, if you look up on Amazon for my book, Terri-Ann Russell, I'm going to pop up.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much, Terri-Ann. This has been such an awesome conversation. I'm very, very excited to share everything that you're doing and just lift you up.
I appreciate you so much for this too. I really am so honored to be part of it. I think it's really going to take off for you.
Thank you so much.